In the small town of Westrich, Montana, the annual horse fair was in full swing. Families, farmers, and riders from all over the county gathered to buy, sell, and showcase their best animals. But on this particular day, it wasn't the bustling crowd that caught Carla's attention. It was Ray, a powerful and untamed stallion, restlessly pacing in a wooden corral. At just 16 years old, Carla was already known in town for her uncanny ability to understand horses in a way few others could. Her connection with them was almost magical, and although many attributed it to her youth, her father Tom knew it was something more. Carla had a gift, and she had proven it time and again with the family's own horses. "Ramiro Soto is going to sell that horse, you know," Tom said, breaking the silence as they both watched Ray circle the corral with wild energy. The man holding the reins, Ramiro, was an old rancher with sun-weathered skin and patience that seemed to be wearing thin. Ramiro turned to the crowd with a sarcastic smile. "Whoever's brave enough to ride this demon, come forward. I'll sell him to the highest bidder," he joked, though his tone held a hint of desperation. The stallion was known to be uncontrollable, a challenge even for the most experienced riders. Carla stood still, her gaze fixed on Ray. There was something in the way the horse moved his body, as if he was waiting for someone to understand him, someone who could calm the storm he carried within. She felt deep in her being that she was that someone. Tom saw the spark in his daughter's eyes and sighed deeply. "Carla," he began, but she had already taken a step forward. "Dad, I want to try," she said firmly, her voice low but determined. She knew what she was doing, or at least she felt it in her gut. This wasn't the first time she had faced a difficult horse, but Ray was different. He wasn't simply a rebellious horse. He was like a force of nature. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked, his tone more of affirmation than doubt. He already knew the answer, but his duty as a father compelled him to make sure one last time. Carla nodded. "Yes, Dad, I can do this." Tom looked at her for a moment, then stepped back with a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. "Then do it. If you can handle Docs, I'm sure you can handle this brute." The murmur among the crowd grew when Carla stepped forward towards Ramiro. "Mr. Soto," she said as she approached Ramiro, her voice firm but respectful, "I'd like to try." Ramiro looked her up and down, clearly incredulous. A girl wanting to ride the demon that no rider had been able to control? He laughed, but in his laughter was more exasperation than mockery. "Seriously, young lady? This isn't a pony for schoolgirls." Carla wasn't made by the taunt. "I know what I'm doing. I just need a chance." For a moment, Ramiro looked at her intently, as if trying to decide if this little girl was crazy or brave. Finally, he released the horse's reins with a grunt. "Go ahead, let's see what you can do." Carla didn't waste time. She stepped forward with a calmness that seemed impossible in the face of a beast like Ray. The horse, a shining black giant, snorted impatiently, moving his head with contained fury. But she showed not a hint of doubt. She knew that approaching an animal like this wasn't a matter of strength, but of mutual respect. Her movements were slow and calculated, her breathing in sync with the animal's, creating an atmosphere of expectation among the crowd. "Everything has its time," Carla thought as she extended her hand, leaving it suspended in the air a few inches from Ray's muzzle. She didn't touch him immediately, but allowed him to decide to approach, to let him accept the presence of someone new. The young girl's patience seemed to be a silent challenge to the crowd watching in complete silence. No one in the corral took their eyes off her. Some thought Ray would throw her to the ground in a matter of seconds. Others hoped for a miracle. Ray, still restless, sniffed Carla's hand, stepped back a bit, snorted, and took a step forward. His large body was a mixture of power and rebellion, but Carla remained unfazed. With a gentleness that defied the tension of the moment, she took another step, this time gently caressing the horse's neck. Ray, surprisingly, didn't react violently. Carla's eyes shone with an almost mystical concentration, as if she could see beyond the animal's abrupt movements, understanding his fear, his resistance. People began to murmur. "What is she doing?" some wondered. It was an approach that few understood. While other trainers would have used force or tried to control the horse by strength, Carla offered something different. Her calm, her confidence. And little by little, Ray noticed it. Although still alert, he no longer moved his head from side to side with the same aggressiveness. "Come on, boy. Come on," Carla whispered, more to herself than to the horse. Her words were barely audible, but Ray seemed to capture them, relaxing slightly under her touch. Each of the young girl's gestures was full of soft but firm intentions, as if she were weaving an invisible bond between the two of them. When Carla finally prepared to mount the horse's back, she didn't use a saddle. The crowd held their breath as they saw the young girl prepare to ride Ray without any protection, only her instinct and the trust she had managed to build in those few minutes. The gesture was bold, and some in the audience began to mutter under their breath, expecting the worst. "This girl is going to fall, or worse," one of the spectators heard. Carla mounted with agility, her body moving as if it were part of Ray, as if it were an extension of him. For a moment, the silence was total. The horse stood still, feeling the light weight of the young girl on his back, as if he were processing what had just happened. But the calm lasted only a second. Suddenly, Ray let out a neigh and stood up on his hind legs, shaking his body with a force that seemed destined to throw Carla off. The spectators screamed. Some women in the audience covered their faces in horror, while other men leaned forward, convinced that Carla would fly through the air at any moment. She held on tight, her hands gripping the horse's mane, moving in unison with the animal's violent movements. "Easy, easy," Carla murmured in Ray's ear, barely audible above the noise of the crowd. Her voice was not one of command, but of understanding. It was as if she were speaking not to his body, but to his spirit, to that wounded part that made the animal react with such force. The struggle continued for minutes that seemed like hours. Ray rose up, turned, tried to shake her off, but Carla remained there, inflexible but serene. Little by little, the horse's energy began to wane. The shaking became less intense, and his neighbors lost strength. To everyone's surprise, Ray finally lowered his front legs and began to walk with disconcerting calmness. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. Ray, the horse that no one had been able to control, was walking docilely under Carla's silent commands. The audience, who had been on the edge of collapse, was left open-mouthed, not knowing whether to applaud or remain silent, overwhelmed by the incredulity of what they had just witnessed. Carla, for her part, maintained her calm expression. It wasn't a victory she needed to celebrate, because it wasn't about defeating Ray, but about finding mutual understanding. With a slight smile and a barely perceptible sigh of relief, she guided the horse back to the center of the corral. The murmurs among the crowd began to increase again, but this time they were of admiration. As Carla guided Ray back to the corral, a reverent silence enveloped the place, broken only by the murmurs of amazement that began to emerge among the crowd. No one had expected it. No one could believe that a young girl with nothing more than her calm and a gentle touch had tamed such an untamable horse. The looks that had previously judged her with skepticism now observed her with respect. From a corner of the corral, a young man with a camera in hand and a phone in the other was recording everything. Rodrigo, a local blogger who attended events in Westridge, had arrived at the place by chance, looking for some interesting story for his social media channel. What he had witnessed was more than he had expected. Without thinking much, he began to broadcast live. "You won't believe it, friends," Rodrigo said in whispers as he focused on Carla and Ray. "This girl is doing what no one could with this horse. Look at her, without a saddle and without fear. Incredible." The video began to gain traction quickly. Reactions were coming from everywhere, with comments on the broadcast praising Carla's bravery and skill. In a matter of minutes, the small feat that had occurred in that remote town in Montana was being seen by people from different parts of the country, and it didn't take long before it started to cross borders. Carla, unaware that her action was already being broadcast to the world, approached her father Tom, who was waiting for her with a proud smile. Although in his eyes it was reflected a slight concern. He knew that while this moment seemed to be a great success, it would also bring with it new challenges. And he wasn't wrong. "You did it, daughter," Tom said in a low voice as he patted her on the back. "I knew you could, but now everyone will know too." Carla returned the smile, but inside her, She already felt the weight of the attention. It wasn't recognition she was looking for. For her, it had always been about the horses, about that special connection she had with them. But now things were about to change. Hours later, in the small Solis ranch, Carla's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded her screen, and her name was mentioned everywhere. Young Tamer, the Miracle of Westrich, the Horse Whisperer. The titles were of all kinds, and although most praised her, not all comments were favorable. One message in particular caught Tom's attention. It came from a well-known horse trainer, someone with many years of experience and some renown in the equestrian community. In his message, the trainer congratulated Carla but also expressed doubts. "You can't tame a horse that quickly without something strange going on," the message said. "Either that horse was previously trained, or that girl's methods are dangerous. We should investigate this further." Tom frowned as he read it and put it in his pocket without telling Carla anything for the moment. He knew that sooner or later someone would question his daughter's abilities, but he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Sudden successes always attract curious and critical glances. The following days were a mixture of excitement and tension. Carla was contacted by journalists, bloggers, and trainers, some with words of support, others with uncomfortable questions. Social media was full of debates about whether her success with Ray was genuine or simply a stroke of luck. Some defended her natural talent, while others doubted her methods. The days became heavy for Carla. What had begun as a moment of glory at the Westrich Fair was now becoming a difficult burden to bear. Carla Solis's name was on everyone's lips, not only in the small town but in the world of social media and, more importantly, among horse training experts. But not everyone spoke with admiration. A well-known specialist in equine ethics, Dr. Ricardo Valverde, made his criticisms public in an article in a popular magazine. Valverde argued that the way Carla had tamed Ray, although impressive at first glance, was possibly detrimental to the animal's welfare. According to him, such a quick taming did not allow the horse to gradually adapt to changes, generating unnecessary stress that could have long-term ecological consequences. "You can't train a horse like Ray in such a short time without imposing extreme pressure," the article said. The superficial calm that Carla shows may hide methods that force the horse to submit unnaturally, affecting its behavior in the future. Dr. Valverde's words resonated like a blow. Carla, accustomed to being respected for her sensitivity towards animals, was now viewed with suspicion by some sectors. Social media exploded in debates, some defending the young girl, admiring her connection with Ray, while others aligned with Valverde, demanding that Carla publicly demonstrate that her methods were not only effective but also ethical. At school, the situation wasn't improving. A group of students, led by Laura, a classmate who had always been critical of Carla, launched a petition among the students for her to show her training process live. "If she's as good as everyone says," Laura commented loudly during recess, "then let her prove it here, not just in a viral video." Laura's words cut deep into Carla. She wasn't the type of person who enjoyed conflict, much less having to prove something to others. For her, her work with horses was personal, something she did for the love and respect she had for them, not to exhibit it before a skeptical audience. That same afternoon, after a long day of classes full of inquisitive looks and whispers, Carla found an envelope on the door of the family stable. Upon opening it, she discovered a letter from Eduardo Martinez, a horse trainer highly respected throughout the country, known for his humanitarian approach to horse taming. Eduardo had heard about Carla and her natural ability with animals, and in his letter, he invited her to his ranch in the state of Durango. "I've followed your story with interest, Carla," the letter began. "I know how difficult it is to face criticism when one is convinced that what they're doing is right. I want to invite you to my ranch so you can learn some methods I've developed over the years. Perhaps you'll find in them something that helps you perfect your skills and respond ethically and transparently to those who doubt your work." Carla read the letter in silence, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. Martinez's invitation was a unique opportunity, but it also implied a new challenge. She knew that if she accepted, she would have to face not only improving her technique, but the possibility of recognizing that perhaps there were aspects of her method that could be perfected. That night, Carla sat at the kitchen table with her father Tom and showed him the letter. "What do you think, Dad?" she asked, seeking in her father the advice that had always guided her in difficult moments. Tom observed the letter in silence for a moment, then looked up at his daughter with an expression that mixed pride and concern. "Martinez is one of the best, Carla. If anyone can teach you something new, it's him. But it's also a great responsibility. Going there means accepting that maybe there are things you can improve." Carla nodded. "I know, Dad. I don't mind learning more. I've always wanted to improve. But I don't want people to think I'm accepting these criticisms because I did something wrong." Tom smiled softly. "It's not about what people think, daughter. It's about what you know is right for the horses. If this helps you be better for them, then it's worth it." With those words, Carla made her decision. The next day, she wrote a response to Eduardo Martinez accepting his invitation. She knew that her trip to the ranch would be more than just a learning opportunity. It would be a way to prove to both her critics and herself that she was committed to constant improvement in the welfare of horses. The journey to Durango wouldn't be easy or short. It would be a path full of new challenges where Carla would have to test not only her ability as a tamer, but also her capacity to grow and adapt in the face of adversity. And she couldn't predict what awaited her at Martinez's ranch. One thing was clear. Her love for horses and her desire to do the right thing would always guide her, even in the most difficult moments. Carla arrived in Durango on a cool morning when the sun was just peeking over the mountains. The journey had been long, but it had allowed her to reflect on everything that was at stake. Now more than ever, she knew that it wasn't just about demonstrating her ability, but about reaffirming her commitment to the welfare of horses. As she got off the train, the clean, dry air greeted her, reminding her why she had accepted Eduardo Martinez's invitation. This wouldn't just be training, but a crucial moment in her life. Eduardo, the renowned trainer, was waiting for her at the station with a warm smile. Of medium height, with a face marked by the sun and years of working with horses, he radiated a calm that Carla found comforting. "Welcome, Carla," Eduardo said as he shook her hand. "I hope the trip wasn't too tiring." Carla smiled slightly, still nervous about what was to come. "A bit long, but I'm ready to learn." During the journey to the ranch, Eduardo spoke to her about his training philosophy. For him, everything revolved around patience and observation. Horses, he said, were not simple animals to be tamed, but sensitive beings that required respect. As the years passed, Carla's impact extended far beyond the borders of her institute. Her humane training techniques began to be adopted in zoos, wildlife sanctuaries, and even on farms around the globe. Veterinarians and biologists incorporated her methods into their own work, recognizing that Carla's gentle approach not only improved animal welfare but also facilitated research and medical treatments. One day, Carla received an unexpected call. It was from a national park in South Africa, where rangers were struggling to protect rhinos from poaching. They had heard about her work with elephants in Kenya and wondered if her techniques could be applied to help calm stressed rhinos and facilitate conservation efforts. Without hesitation, Carla embarked on a new adventure. Arriving at the park, she faced a challenging situation. The rhinos, constantly threatened by poachers, had become aggressive and difficult to approach, even for the rangers trying to protect them. Carla knew she would need to adapt her techniques for this new species, but the fundamental principles of respect and patience would remain the same. In the weeks that followed, Carla worked tirelessly with the park staff. She taught them to observe rhino body language, recognize signs of stress, and approach the animals in a non-threatening manner. Slowly but surely, the rhinos began to show signs of calmness in the presence of the rangers. One day, during a routine patrol, the team encountered an injured rhino, a victim of a failed poaching attempt. In the past, treating such a large and frightened animal would have been nearly impossible without resorting to heavy sedatives, which could complicate its recovery. But using Carla's techniques, the rangers were able to approach the wounded rhino, calm it, and treat it on the spot. This success not only saved the rhino's life, but also marked a turning point in the fight against poaching in the park. With the animals calmer and more trusting, rangers could monitor them more closely and respond more quickly to any threats. News of Carla's work with the rhinos spread quickly. Soon, other parks and reserves began requesting her help. She traveled to India to work with tigers, to Indonesia to help orangutans, and even to the Arctic to assist in polar bear conservation. In each place she visited, Carla not only helped the animals but also inspired people. Forest rangers, biologists, and conservationists from around the world began to see animals in a new light. They were no longer just creatures to be studied or protected from a distance, but sensitive beings capable of forming meaningful connections with humans. Back at her institute in Montana, Carla began incorporating her new experiences into her training curriculum. She developed specific programs for different species, from large mammals to small primates. Students from all over the world came to learn from her, eager to take her techniques back to their own countries and apply them in their areas of expertise. One day, while walking through the fields of her institute, Carla reflected on her journey. She remembered that young girl in Montana who dreamed of making a difference in the world of horses. She could never have imagined that her love for those animals would lead her on a global mission of compassion and understanding. Looking at the animals grazing peacefully around her, horses, rescued elephants, and even some of the rhinos she had helped in Africa, Carla felt a wave of gratitude. Each of these animals had a story, a journey from fear and distrust that had been transformed into one of trust and peace. But Carla knew her work was far from over. As long as there were animals suffering in the world, as long as there were people who didn't understand the importance of treating all creatures with respect, she would continue her mission. That night, sitting in her office, Carla began to write. Her experiences, her techniques, her success stories, and even her failures. All of this needed to be shared with the world. She envisioned a book that could reach people in every corner of the planet, inspiring them to see animals in a new way. As the words flowed, Carla felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her book would not just be a training manual, but a call to action, a plea for humanity to reconsider its relationship with the natural world. In the weeks and months that followed, Carla worked tirelessly on her book. She interviewed colleagues, revisited old notes, and even traveled to gather more stories and insights. Each chapter was a journey through different species and ecosystems, but all united by the same central theme: the incredible capacity of animals to connect with us when we approach them with kindness and respect. Finally, after a year of hard work, Carla's book was published. Whispers from the Wild Heart, a journey of compassion through the animal kingdom, quickly became an international bestseller. Readers from around the world were enchanted by Carla's stories, from her early days with horses to her encounters with elephants and rhinos. The book not only inspired a new generation of trainers and conservationists, but also touched the hearts of ordinary people. Readers began sharing stories of how they had changed their approach with their own pets, or how they had been inspired to volunteer at local shelters. Universities started incorporating Carla's book into their veterinary and biology curricula. Zoos and national parks around the world adopted her techniques, reporting significant improvements in the welfare of the animals under their care. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the minds and hearts of people. Carla's book opened many eyes to the emotional intelligence and sensitivity of animals. It challenged the notion that humans were somehow separate from or superior to the rest of the animal kingdom, instead presenting a vision of interconnectedness and mutual respect. As her message spread, Carla was invited to speak at international conferences, participate in documentaries, and even advise governments on animal welfare policies. Her voice became one of the most respected in the field of conservation and animal rights. But for Carla, true success wasn't in the awards or recognition. It was in the small changes she saw happening every day. In the child who decided to treat their dog with more patience. In the farmer who opted for more humane breeding methods. In the tourist who chose to visit an elephant sanctuary instead of a circus. Each of these small actions was a step towards the world Carla had always dreamed of. A world where humans and animals coexisted in harmony, where respect and compassion were the norm, not the exception. As Carla continued her work, traveling the world, teaching and inspiring, she carried with her the certainty that each heart touched, each mind opened, was a victory. And although she knew the journey was far from over, she moved forward with hope and determination, knowing that each step taken was a step towards a more compassionate future for all creatures on Earth. As Carla continued her work, traveling the world, teaching and inspiring, she carried with her the certainty that each heart touched, each mind opened, was a victory. And although she knew the journey was far from over, she moved forward with hope and determination, knowing that each step taken was a step towards a more compassionate future for all creatures on Earth. Her influence continued to grow, reaching even the most unexpected places. Governments began to consult her on animal welfare policies, and her methods were being implemented in wildlife rehabilitation centers across continents. Carla's work was no longer just about training animals. It had evolved into a global movement for compassion and understanding. One day, Carla received an invitation that would take her work to an entirely new level. The United Nations had decided to create a special committee on animal welfare and conservation, and they wanted Carla to be a key advisor. This was an unprecedented opportunity to influence politics on a global scale, to bring her message of respect and compassion for animals to the world's most influential decision-makers. As she prepared for her first UN meeting, Carla reflected on how far she had come from that young girl in Montana who had a special way with horses. She never could have imagined that her love for animals would lead her to address world leaders and shape international policy. But here she was, ready to take on this new challenge. The UN committee work was intense and often challenging. Carla found herself navigating complex political landscapes, trying to balance the needs of animals with human interests. She worked tirelessly to educate policymakers about the importance of animal welfare, not just for the animals themselves, but for the health of our planet and our own species. Her efforts began to bear fruit. Countries started adopting more stringent animal protection laws. Conservation efforts were bolstered with new, more humane approaches. Even industries that had long been resistant to change, like factory farming and animal testing, began to explore more ethical alternatives. But Carla knew that laws and policies were only part of the solution. The real change had to come from people's hearts. So, alongside her work with the UN, she continued to write, speak, and teach. She launched online courses that reached millions of people around the world, teaching them how to better understand and care for the animals in their lives. One of her most successful initiatives was a global youth program that connected children with animals in their local communities. The program taught kids about animal behavior, welfare, and conservation, inspiring a new generation of animal advocates. Carla loved visiting these youth groups, seeing the spark of compassion and understanding in young eyes as they interacted gently with animals. Years passed, and Carla's hair began to gray, but her passion never dimmed. If anything, it burned brighter with each passing year. She had seen so much change, so much progress, but she knew there was still work to be done. On her 70th birthday, Carla stood at the podium of an international animal welfare conference. Looking out at the sea of faces, young and old, from every corner of the globe, she felt a surge of hope. These were the people who would carry on her work, who would continue to fight for a world where all creatures were treated with kindness and respect. "My friends," she began, her voice still strong and clear, "we have come so far, but our journey is not over. Every day, we must choose compassion. We must be the voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. We must remember that we share this planet with countless other beings, each deserving of respect and care." As she spoke, Carla could see the determination in the eyes of her audience. She knew that her legacy would live on through them, through every person who chose kindness over cruelty, understanding over fear. "The world we dream of," she continued, "a world where humans and animals live in harmony, where every creature is valued and protected, that world is within our reach. It begins with each one of us, with every small act of compassion, with every moment we take to truly see and understand the animals around us." Carla's voice grew soft, but her words carried to every corner of the room. "I may not see that world in my lifetime, but I know it's coming. Because of you. Because of every person who has ever looked into an animal's eyes and seen a kindred spirit. Keep fighting. Keep loving. Keep believing in the power of compassion to change the world." As she finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. But for Carla, the real reward was knowing that her life's work would continue, that the seeds of compassion she had planted would grow and flourish long after she was gone. That night, as Carla sat on the porch of her Montana ranch, watching the stars come out over the fields where animals grazed peacefully, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had given everything she had to her mission, and although there was still much to be done, she knew that she had helped to set the world on a better path. The gentle nicker of a horse in the nearby paddock caught her attention. Smiling, Carla stood up and walked over to the fence. As she stroked the horse's soft nose, she whispered, "Thank you, old friend. You started it all." And as the night deepened around her, Carla stood there, surrounded by the quiet presence of the animals she had dedicated her life to protecting, feeling grateful for every step of her incredible journey.